check in here in the second hour. The South African National Christian Forum has approached the Constitutional Court to urgently interdict the government from declaring COVID-19 vaccination mandatory. The president of the forum, Pastor Marothi Josias Mashashane, joins us to explain this particular move. Pastor, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time this evening. Talk to us about what is at the heart of your fight.
Good evening, and thank you very much for having us. Greetings to the viewers as well. Yes, our position is we see now the threat to democracy, and the Bill of Rights are no longer protected for people to make informed decisions about their bodies and what they want to do. So I think our position is simply that we don't agree with the government proposal of so-called mandatory vaccination. We are of the opinion that a real leader or the caring government would go out and inform people, convince people, influence people, rather than dictating and forcing people so that they take a decision through a threat and fear. That is all that we are standing against.
So you argue in your court papers that Christians, and I quote, Christians are now forced to take a COVID-19 vaccination against their religious beliefs, as they are told that government is preparing a COVID-19 passport, and without it, they won't be allowed to go to church. This is further discrimination and creates a stigma to those who choose not to vaccinate. Before I ask you about how do you know that people who don't have a vaccination passport are not going to be in church, we'll talk about that in just a moment. I'm interested from finding out from you as to why the Christians you represent are against vaccination. What are their concerns exactly?
Thank you very much. Let me firstly correct you, Sis Bongiwe. We as Christians, we are not so-called as labeled to be anti-vaccination people. All that we are standing for is that people need to make a choice out of their informed, to make an informed decision out of their own will, not under duress or fear. Nevertheless, we as Christians, we also know about the 666, which was told from the Bible. And the way this vaccination is becoming forcible to our people, and at some stage people are promised even a reward or some sort, favors or whatever, you know, when they take a vaccination, then it started to trigger in our minds as to whether we are not taking now a 666, the mark of the beast. So why should people be forced if the vaccination it's a solution? And why should people be rewarded like others? They getting even groceries, you know, after you accept to be vaccinated. The same grocery that people looted, and the government went all out to get the soldiers to collect groceries from the poor community after the looting. But the same shops that were crying for that grocery, it's able to give it as a reward whenever you take a vaccination. Therefore, that is really a triggering and making more resistant when the government is failing to have a clear approach and a manner of convincing or influencing. More than anything, they didn't even do much work to come to the community and inform the community about this vaccination.
So,
look, 2 weeks back, I had an interview with both the MEC of Health in Gauteng, the MEC of Health in Limpopo. And yes, after the discussion and the interview, they all accepted that the Department of Health has failed to inform or to reach out to the people so that they can be informed.
Definitely, definitely. And Dr. Marothi, that vaccination communication strategy is something that, has been under the spotlight for quite some time. But I'm very keen to find out from something that you've said, because you say that for you, when you see how, as you say, and I quote, people are being forced to now take this vaccine. As Christians, Ntate Marothi, I do believe that you communicate with God. And have you had a conversation with God about this particular vaccine? Because it's one thing to have the trigger that you say you had, and that then led to conversations and questions around the mark of the beast. But have you taken these concerns to God himself, and what has he said?
Thank you very much. Our position in terms of our God, God is saying, I lay before you life and death. And this God is saying, I advise you to choose life. He doesn't force people to choose life. He gives people the right to make a choice. And that is exactly what we are advocating here, Bongiwe. We are saying, let the government allow people, whether people will decide based on their religion, based on the doctrine of their different churches, but let people make an informed decision and choice, not under a threat of, taking away their Bill of Rights, the protected rights of which are under our Constitution. This pandemic will come, and one day this pandemic will be the history, but our Constitution will remain. And the reason why we've got the government and the cabinet, they took the oath of office. And the basic of the oath of office is to protect our Constitution. It cannot be correct that our government keeps silent when there is employers who threaten people that if you don't take vaccine, we are going to kick you out of employment. That is not acceptable. It is a breach of our Constitution. And we are simply standing for that. We are not going to say we prayed and God is saying vaccine it's a 666 or whatsoever. We don't want to claim to have heard from God. All that we are saying is people must be given the liberty to make a choice. And our churches are not going to discriminate people based on their choice. We are not going to say the doors are open only to vaccinated, or rather we are Christians, we are against vaccination. If you vaccinate, don't come to church.
So
this is just a division of the society, which we really fighting.
So, Ntate Marothi, before we get to the rights themselves, because we know that no right is absolute and cannot trample on another's rights. But let's pause for a second there. I want us to go, and I'd really like to get your thoughts on this one, because you say that Cabinet has taken an oath of office and they have promised to serve, which is true. They have taken the oath. But when you read the Bible in Romans 13, it says, and I quote, "Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. It continues to say, consequently, he who rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. What do you think? In fact, what are your reflections when you listen to this? Would you say that you may be seen by some as rebelling against the government that is put by God and authority that God has put over our heads as, you know, this country? Or what would then your reflections be when you're standing and looking at this word and what you've just said?
Thank you very much. When God says we need to obey the government, or rather the leadership, we only obey the government when we are convinced that that leadership or government has best interest in heart for us. When I am the father of my house, my children obey me when they know that every decision I'm making, I am doing that for their best interest. But the moment as a mother, Bongiwe, you cook food and your children say, because we were not there when you were cooking, we don't trust you, we can't eat your food when we were not there, there's a problem. So in this case, we need to admit that people have lost trust in the government that is leading at the moment. And it is for that reason that people will doubt. I want to say in short, dictatorship is when people are forced to make a decision out of fear. But when we're talking about the real leadership, it's when people follow the order with their consent. But here people are now taken away the right to give consent, but they are forced under duress to say, if you don't do this, this will happen to you. If you don't this, then we are not allowed to have the freedom of movement.
I hear you, Ntate Marothi, I hear you. I'm just now wondering at the back of what you said. So this particular scripture of Romans then only applies to the people you lead or to yourself only when it makes sense to you? Or I'm a bit confused here as to, do you apply this word as is, as God has said, or are you doing so with conditions?
I think the question is very good, and I like the question. We are applying that when it doesn't lead us into breaking the law. Like, for an example, it is not everybody in the country who is led by the Bible. But we believe that any regulation which is contradicting the word of God, the Bible, we are not going to bow to that act or to such a leadership. We need the leadership that will obey of all the contract of the country, the law, the superior of being our constitution. Number two, it is very clear, Bongiwe, our constitution says when the rights of a person is taken away or limited, it must be under a lawful or reasonable cause. In this, we are not getting any reasonable cause when somebody is told that only vaccine is the solution. We don't have the same. Others, they believe in the traditional medication. Why should the person be forced that the only solution is a vaccine, not having allowance to any alternative? We have already prayed for people who were COVID-19 sick. We prayed for them, they get healed. So we believe that vaccine is not the only thing. Even if it was the only thing, people cannot be forced.
All right.
Same applies with HIV, when you take the ARV, it is your choice, but if you don't take it, you cannot be punished for that.
Ndata Marothi, apologies, we've run out of time, but in 20 seconds, when is this matter being heard in court? And should you not be successful, which other avenues would you pursue then to try and take this matter forward?
Thank you very much. Indeed, we have enrolled the matter on an urgent basis, and then ours was to have the matter heard on the 28th, which is this coming, I think, Tuesday. And if the matter, we are not given a relief, we have already agreed. We will be having a national lockdown, which obviously is going to include the Christians, even the traditional leaders, so that if possible, we have to lodge a motion to remove the present government, which is now paying or protecting the oath of office.
Okay, thank you so much, Ntate Marothi. We certainly do appreciate your time this evening. We'll watch this matter very closely, as experts have been saying that this is going to be a test that is needed in the courts in order to be able to settle this matter once and for all. We are expecting a showdown then on the 28th of September, as you would have heard. That's Marothi Mashashane, who is the president of the South African National Christian Forum.